Okay, thanks for waiting. So as he said, I'm Marcy Sutton, and I am so excited to be here. This is incredible. I've been to a number of Creative Mornings events. This is actually my photo from the EMP space. So I love being here just because I get to interact with people that I might not normally, as you know, I'm in the development team most of the time. But I care a lot about design and art and people, and so it's a pretty big honor to be here talking with you today. The theme this month, as you know, is empathy. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I do, how empathy relates to my work, and just what I think about it in general. And I'm going to frame it in 5 things that I've learned from the accessibility community. You can find me on Twitter at Marcy Sutton. The hashtag for today, if you want to add your tweets or Instagram photos to be tagged with everything else around the world, because this is an international event, it's CM Empathy. Sometimes I can't ever figure out what the hashtag is on the day, so I figured I'd help you out with that one. So if you don't know me, you can learn a lot about me in this one picture from a childhood project that I found in my mom's storage unit. I think it's from probably 2nd or 3rd grade, and it says, "My favorite toys are my bike and my dog. I ride my bike with my friends. My dog's name is Peaches." So I love my bike and my dog, and this is from 2nd grade, and absolutely nothing has changed. So now you know a little bit about me and the things that mean a lot to me. I grew up in Seattle. I went to high school here. I went away to college at Brooks Institute of Photography in Ventura, California. So my background is definitely in the creative side. But I was building websites for most of that time. Even before that, I think my first website was a photography portfolio. And I really wanted to be a photojournalist. I wanted to work in a newsroom and to tell stories about people. And that hasn't really changed, but at some point, when newspapers all started to go downhill, I pivoted into web development. So I came back to Seattle. I love it here, and I remember coming home from college on breaks, and I would just walk around the neighborhoods of Seattle and yearn to live here. And so I'm really, really excited that I was able to come back, afford to live here. That's not exactly easy. I went back to school at one point at the Art Institute of Seattle, and I got a 2nd degree in web design and multimedia. And through that degree, I got to focus on typography and motion design and graphic arts while pushing my development skills. That was a really good fit for me. That led to getting into the industry, working at agencies. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what that journey was like, because that is why I care about accessibility, was working in agencies, and it just sort of happened that way. I didn't expect it at all. I thought I was going to be a photojournalist. So a lot of the photos in this talk today I went back through 5 years of mostly iPhone photos, because that's the camera that I keep in my pocket all the time. Except ironically today, because I forgot it at home. But I found some really great gems from my time at Pop, just what I was going through as I transitioned into an accessibility professional. Because I'm actually in my first official accessibility job now at Adobe. I'm an accessibility engineer. Before this position, which I started in July, I just did accessibility because I cared about it. Once I learned that it was a thing, that I could help people and actually make the world a better place through digital artwork or digital experiences, I cared so much more about my work. And so that all happened at Pop. I worked there for 3 years, and at one point I was asked to lead front-end development for the Target account. And Target, obviously if you're from the US, you're probably familiar with Target. They have a great brand, a lot of really great outreach efforts, and so for agency partners, there's a lot of opportunity to build really cool things. They had some legal action brought against them in 2007, and so as an agency, anything that you deliver for a company like Target has to be accessible. So as a lead front-end person on the Target account, that's how that happened. And you know, I could have just gotten into it and been like, yeah, whatever, accessibility. It turned out that talking with Target's accessibility team and meeting people who have disabilities made me care about it so much more. And once I got to know them and their struggles, I never really turned that part of my brain off. The empathy piece never went away. So it's gotten stronger and stronger over the years. I don't work on the Target account anymore because I don't work at Pop, but I'm still connected with people on that team. And we're actually good friends now. And so it's pretty cool that that's turned out that way. I keep saying this, at one point, and going back through my photos, I found some really cool stuff that highlighted where I was at, 3 years ago. And we worked on the corporate website for Target. It was a huge project. It was what I called the best project ever, because the technology it was the first responsive design site I had worked on. It was for a Fortune 100 company with a beautiful brand. It had to be accessible. So it was sort of this happy place of technology and accessibility and branding all coming together. And I found a pretty cool photo of sitting in my backyard. I had my laptop open. I've got the mobile site and the developer tools in the browser, and then a can of beer. I think it was probably a Friday afternoon. And this is work and love together. This was the coolest thing to work on. And because of the nature of web development, you can be more mobile. You can go and work on your laptop in an airport or on an airplane or in your backyard drinking a beer. And so I found this passion for creating websites and then making them accessible with new technology. So this was a really, really cool project, and it paved the way to work on bigger things later. Fast forward a couple of years, and I am now presenting on accessibility topics, because at a point in my career, I would be sitting in the audience like you are right now, and I would get this adrenaline rush and just go, I want to go talk about that. And I didn't really know what I wanted to talk about at first. But what I knew and what I cared about and the things that I was interested in exploring were in accessibility. And so now I have been fortunate enough to go and present at accessibility conferences where I am there with my heroes and with people who are doing the work that I care about. And I go and I can listen to them, because part of what I'm going to talk to you about today is how I have approached accessibility as a newcomer. So in February, or actually it was March, because this was on my birthday of this year, I presented developments in AngularJS accessibility at the CSUN conference. CSUN stands for Cal State University Northridge, and it's an accessibility conference that has run for 30 years. Think about that, 30 years. I mean, how much has technology changed in 30 years? The struggles and the needs that people with disabilities have not changed in 30 years. The technology has. And so there's a lot of legacy there. And to go and present to that group, I'm still really excited that I get to do that. So I got to go and do my first talk there. We also, because I mentioned earlier that I care a lot about bikes, we put together a tandem bicycling event with pairing vision impaired and other people to go out and ride bikes together. And this was one of the most special days ever, because I'll never forget hearing my friend Laura Legendary. She's standing off to the left of the frame. She's vision impaired. Steve Sossin, who's on the back of the tandem bike, he's blind. And then Elle Waters is sitting on the front of the bike. Steve is actually the guy who got me into accessibility. He was the guy on the Target accessibility team who I would work with on the phone tirelessly to figure out why something didn't work. And hearing it from his perspective made the whole difference. And so at CSUN this year, when we went and rode bikes and we almost killed Steve, it was incredible. And I heard Laura, not that part specifically, but what was incredible was hearing Laura, my partner, echoing in my ear, I'm free. This is amazing, and I want to do this every day. And just to have something like that unfold at a tech conference was incredible. So I'm really hoping that we get to do that again this year, because that's a collision, that's a happy place. When you can combine all of your passions together with people that you like to hang around, that's magical. So now in accessibility, I notice it everywhere. Outside of digital design, I think about accessibility. What are our cities like? How can people in wheelchairs get around? What's our public transit like? BART in the Bay Area, I was riding from SFO up to San Francisco, and I just noticed this wheelchair sign and the note reminding that, people that federal law requires this space to be made available to wheelchair users. The reason I took this photo at the time was because there was news item about a startup, a transit startup, who had taken all of the accessibility features out of their buses, allegedly, and replaced them with bars. So they took the wheelchair ramps out of the vans and put a bar in instead. So you're discriminating against your customer, basically. And so this was going through my head, and I'm riding on BART and noticing, oh, well, they proudly display their approach to accessibility because they're federally mandated to. And so it's important that, we consider, it's a bummer that it takes legal requirements to make people care about accessibility. And the reason why I get out and talk about it more at things like this is to just inspire you to care about it outside of the legal ramifications. Because if we're actually going to make it better, it's not going to be by getting threatened and, with legal action. If we actually care about accessibility before we get legal action brought against us, we can say what an accessible, good user experience is. We can innovate things for people with disabilities and make the world better. So those 5 things that I mentioned, the 5 things I learned from the accessibility community, to set us up ahead of time, if you ever see this word, A11Y, it's actually a numeronym. It means accessibility. And a numeronym means that the number of letters in between the first letter and the last letter, that's how you create the numeronym. So A11Y stands for accessibility. So if you ever want to, tweet about accessibility, you're one of the cool kids now, So listen and learn. Know your craft. Design for people with low vision, make it more obvious, and be positive. And we're going to go into each one of these. Listen and learn. I can't think about, learning from my mistakes without thinking about Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Because, as curmudgeonly as he seems to learn from his mistakes in that movie. He gets it better every day. He'll figure out things. And so sometimes, the same mistakes happen over and over, and it's all about what you do with them. So that was my that's what I thought of for this first piece, listen and learn. I'm going to admit that my approach to accessibility is sort of selfish. It's thinking about what happens when I go out in the backcountry and I have an accident and I end up in a wheelchair, or even I'm temporarily disabled, or I lose my vision, or my mom loses her vision. Someone close to me has something catastrophic happen. Or you have a child that has a disability. They're born that way. I care so much about the people that are close to me that this is stuff that I think about all the time. As it turns out, once you care about the people closest to you, that doesn't really stop there. You kind of it grows, and your love just keeps going out in the world. And so I think about the risk that we take every day. We have this joke about the bus problem, like the person who has the keys to the most important, feature at work or something. If they get hit by a bus, your company is screwed. So things can happen. You could have something change in your life, and all of a sudden, you can't use a mouse anymore. So that's sort of how I think about accessibility and empathy. In accessibility, as a newcomer, there's a lot of legacy. And part of what I wanted to do, coming in, especially going to the CSUN conference, was to respect that there are people who've been doing this for 30 years, who have so much that they can teach me as a newcomer. I might be able to bring energy and passion and new ideas, but I have to pay homage to the people who have done all of this research and all of this work before me. In accessibility, there are some topics that are just heated. And I don't really want to get into that. I want to avoid the drama and be low stress. One example is long desk, and I'm sort of on the edge of web standards in my work right now. I care a lot about the problems that we solve over and over again as developers. How can we get browser makers to actually take on those problems so we're not solving the same thing over and over again, like a carousel or an overlay or whatever the feature is. Long desk is one of those features in web standards that allows you to create a longer description to describe an image. So like, think of a long paragraph. So the technical piece that you would use, maybe, is this thing called long desk. And to learn more about it, I went and I tried to find one of the web standards email threads. If you've ever seen those, it's just like reply after reply after reply. And you can't just drop into the middle. You have to like go back through the entire chain. And it goes back years sometimes. So web standards and accessibility sometimes are just really hard to get into. And it's a little scary. And this tweet that I found from the W3C announcing the HTML image description extension called LongDesk is now a W3C recommendation, meaning they're saying, yes, this is a feature that we endorse. The first reply says, we're disappointed in you for endorsing this. And this is this back and forth that's just, I don't get it, really. I don't really want to. Just tell me when the feature lands and when we can use it. Because we just want to make the web more accessible. I don't want to fight over it. So that sadly, that's part of what you get into with accessibility. So I want to listen to that. It's something that seems more healthy that I could probably learn more from is user testing. You know, getting our apps and experiences in front of actual people. Because it seems like sometimes we're only considering our own abilities and we're designing for ourselves. But we have our own biases and our own, you know, we don't use things in the same way that someone with a disability might. And so one of my personal goals is to listen and learn more from my users. And I have a picture of a blind guy talking to a robot. And the robot was actually voiced by a man across the room with a microphone. And just hearing this guy walk up to the robot and explore it with his hands, and the man with the voice was saying, oh, well, I'm a robot and I can raise my neck. And he could, you know, talk to the guy. And just this back and forth of discovery and that first impression that this blind man had with this robot, it just stuck with me. And even though I'm not necessarily building robots, that sort of first impression and that first-hand user feedback of this piece of technology, like that's the thing that I want to get to more. So the next of the 5 things is to know your craft. And this one's pretty important with accessibility, and it's one that I come up against again and again, is that sometimes we don't quite know how the tools work. And the image I have is from Wright Brothers Cycle Works in Fremont. And this place it's actually a really interesting comparison to a place like this, at Galvanize. It's a co-working bicycle space. And they have classes, and you can go in and learn from people who are there, use their tools. And they have this space on the wall where they have drawn outlines of all of the tools to remind you of where they go. And it says, these are not spoke cutters, because apparently people confuse them. And so this is a place where you're actually learning a craft. You know, you're not a professional yet. You're going to learn about cycling. And I just thought this was a really interesting parallel to sort of how we look at web design and development. And sometimes when we're getting into it, we don't know all the tools. We don't know how HTML works necessarily, but we need to. It needs to be a place that we get to if we're going to be at that professional level. So the first part of this, and I'll try to not make this too technical. I do a lot of technical talks. But use Semantic HTML. If you're developing or you're working with a developer, make them use real button elements. Make them use Semantic HTML. And this is really key to understanding the web as a platform, is knowing that the tools that you use could enable someone with a screen reader to actually interact with your app or your website. So if you use Semantic HTML, what that means is that there's actually, you know, semantic meaning in the document. So beyond the way it looks, it can actually be exposed to a screen reader or other assistive technology in a more meaningful way. So this is one of those tools that we have to consider. Thinking even, you know, more broad about that, if you expand your definition of user experience to not just be people like you might consider Braille displays, or let's see, there's all of these new technologies like navigating by voice. If you could do that, that might free up people. And technologies like Siri, obviously their runaway success it's pretty usable technology. And so what I want to encourage you to do is just think beyond your own skills and abilities. And that's where that user testing piece is really helpful, because then you can get feedback where you might just have no idea how somebody uses your app. Part of that is designing for people with low vision. We talk about blind people and screen readers a lot in accessibility. That's actually a way smaller segment than people who just have low vision. And that could mean maybe you have a degenerative vision loss and everything's getting blurry. And maybe you can just see through a little pinhole. Or maybe you have color contrast issues where you really need high contrast designs. So something that was new to me getting into accessibility was that the number of people with low vision is huge. It's like 249 million people in the world or something, like way more than the number of blind people. And so that's a pretty big segment. And I feel like with color contrast in particular in designs, that's something that we're like, yeah. We're close. It's fine. And that is a huge one. Now that I know that that's a big audience, that's way more important than we give credit for. So part of this idea of supporting people who have low vision is making your apps flexible. You know, letting things just organically change size, and it's okay. If the font size changes because the user changes the setting on their mobile device, everything won't just break. And there's a pretty never-ending list of things that you could go nuts with this. You could have to support all of these features. Just knowing that this is something that a user would do is the first step. Just knowing that they need to zoom and you don't want to lock down zooming. Just knowing how the user interacts with your app is the first step. So another thing to think about for low contrast or for low vision people is, what does it look like in high contrast mode? We care so much about our brand colors and our identity and the white space and balance. What if somebody really needs to invert the colors on your app or your website? You don't really want them to because your design is so beautiful, but that's how they can read it best. And so we sort of have to just let go of those expectations of people and just know that they might navigate it differently. And high contrast mode is one example. There's a Windows version. There's Safari or OS 10 and in Mac, they have their own inverted colors thing. So these are tools that people need to actually read the web. One last piece for low vision people, and this is an interface design thing. I mentioned that sometimes people with low vision, it's like you're looking through a straw because that's your field of vision. It's very narrow. If you think about interacting with a form, if you're having to scan the thing back and forth from left to right because the label's on one side and the input's on the other, it gets really tiresome to have to scan back and forth. Because if you're, imagine being zoomed up to 400%, and all of a sudden you're having to move back and forth. So something that you could do in your designs is just to consider that if you go straight down a line, and guess what, this works great on a mobile device, it makes it a lot easier for people to just naturally follow the flow of this design. So I'm telling you all this because you're creatives and you could actually make an impact for people who need this kind of stuff. Make it more obvious. And I have kind of a risque photo from cyclocross. In cyclocross, we heckle and we have fun and we're obvious about it. We're not hiding. We're going out there in costumes. We're making it pretty obvious that we're there to have fun and heckle. And so I liked that as sort of a takeaway for just making things more obvious in general. Subtlety doesn't always help your users. So some ways to apply this: showing the focus state. So when a keyboard user is navigating through your design, what does that look like? You can actually design that. A lot of people just turn it off because they don't know that that's a thing that people need. So if you actually design for that, you can account for it in your brand colors. You could say, this is what the focus style looks like. And gov.uk is a site that I think does that pretty well. Describe icons. So we like to be pretty vague and assume that everyone knows what our icons mean. And I have a kind of a funny example from Bootstrap, which is a design framework. They use the hamburger button, we call the hamburger button. And a lot of people don't know what that is. You think it's a convention, but you get outside of the tech world and people don't necessarily know what things mean. Especially if you get into older audiences. Like until you know what that pattern is, you might not know what that means. So I have a sort of cheeky example of the Hamburglar pointing to the hamburger button. But really, a realistic example would be just to write the word menu under it. So if you add text to it, then there's just no ambiguity about what the thing is for. So if you're more specific and describe icons, you don't have to like hit people over the head with it, but don't assume that subtlety will work for more people. Limit the marketing speak. So sometimes, as a developer or designer, someone else is writing the copy and they write it in a way that just doesn't really make sense to people. You don't quite get what they're doing. Challenge them to make it more general. Think about voting booths and how people might not know what they're voting for. I've actually heard about studies where if they tweak one line of copy on a call to action, it will increase engagement in a voting booth. For stuff like that, that's really important. You could imagine that making things more general and easier to follow the reading level, you could expand your audience to more people because all of a sudden it's more intuitive for them to use your interface. My one caveat, though, is if you are going to do marketing speak, make it something like Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec, where he says, leftovers are déjà food. That was actually in my photo library when I went back through all my photos, and I was like, that's in, it's going in. Provide captions for your images, either on screen or off screen. Just you need alt text for your images. And my example is an image that I could write an essay about. And I have written an essay about it. It has, I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dogs in the photo. They're all going to the dog park. And each one of their faces, I could write a paragraph on. I love this photo so much. So this is sort of the extreme for like an image that you have to write content for. And you have to balance, your reader's time, how much time it takes you to write the caption, just something other than nothing, something other than the file name, because that could be meaningless. So if you think about writing captions for people using screen readers, you can give them a much more rich experience. Be positive. And if you know me, this is probably the most obvious thing that I would say on a day like today. This image is from New Zealand, and I went there to go to the Webstock conference, which I highly recommend if you have a reason to go to New Zealand. Or if you don't, that's a good reason to go to New Zealand. But I just found a happy place there, especially in February. It's summertime. They ride mountain bikes there. They care about creative and design. And I just found I had such a good time there that this photo made me really happy. So on being positive, a couple months ago, I launched a blog, a Tumblr called Accessibility Wins. And on this blog, I highlight things that are wins in accessibility because there's so many fails. There's so many things wrong that this blog would have 3 or 4 times the volume if I had focused on accessibility fails. But you know what? That just bums people out. It's really, especially when you see their reaction to the thing and you've just crapped all over their work. I found that the opposite of that, when someone is notified that they won, it's just it's a blog, it's not a big deal. But when I notify them, hey, I featured your thing, they're so excited, and it makes them want to do more for accessibility. Big companies like Microsoft, I thought they were immune to that, but they just get beat down so much that getting a win, being praised for something goes a long way. And if we all do that, we can encourage this happier place, and we can actually make the world more accessible by encouraging each other. So that's what I'm trying to do, because nobody really wants to do things under the threat. Remember Target? We were talking about, with accessibility, it's way more fun if you do it ahead of time, before you're getting told that you suck. So don't let perfect be the enemy of good. What was key to this blog was that I had to really find the wins, and sometimes they're hard to find. And sometimes I'll write about something and I'll get feedback that, oh, well, that thing's not perfect, or there's something else that's wrong with that site. And I'm like, it doesn't really matter, because they did this one thing well, and they deserve praise for that, because then that will give them fuel to go and do the rest of it. So I'm trying really hard to find the good in things, because that is what gets people motivated. I've done a lot of speaking on accessibility in the last year, and at first I got really frustrated when an app would get praise in the community, on Wired feature about the whole site and how it's great and how it's a great user experience. And I would just get so angry that they would get praise for something that's so inaccessible. And it really got under my skin for a while, and I did a bunch of talks that actually hopefully made a difference. I think it did make a difference, and I had to go through this exercise to learn. I came out on the other end with way more empathy than I had when I started, because I learned it's not unique to them. I can go up and harp on this one site, but it's actually not unique to them. These problems exist elsewhere. And so by sort of softening my tone and my approach, it made it a lot easier for me to live with. It made other people a lot more comfortable. And so with accessibility, I've tried to be more empathetic to the people who are doing it wrong. Because if you want to bring them along, you have to encourage them. And getting up and saying that you did this wrong doesn't really work. So it's not unique to them. This one, on being positive, is something I learned from my sister, who's basically a professional cyclist. And she says, don't sweat the medium stuff. She's had some trauma in her life and some grief, and her way of overcoming that grief is just to find the positive in it. And for me, getting into web standards and accessibility and all of these things where people are just mad about stuff sometimes, I try to just be even-tempered and don't sweat that medium stuff. And that's hard to do sometimes, but I found that just keeps everything more positive. And so I'm sort of mixing my personal life and my work life together here by just saying, like, take it easy, and you can make things better over time, but you just have to sort of ride it out and don't sweat the medium stuff. So that is it. Thank you. Do we normally do Q&A at these things? Q&A. Okay, let's do this. So if anyone has any questions, you can also just tweet at me or come grab me after or whatever, but if you have any questions, yes.
So I'm curious about, when you look at accessibility, do you feel like a unified, like, holistic experience shared by everybody regardless of their level of access is the right direction versus, say, version A is for people with this disability, version B is like segmenting users out that way?
So the question was about, does it make sense to have one unified site that everyone can use versus, segmenting it by audience? I think it's better to have one because it's less to maintain, and it doesn't make people feel like they're off siloed. You're not forcing someone to use a mobile site or forcing them to go use a native app. If you make one thing, then you can focus all your effort on one thing. Sometimes that's hard to do, though, because everybody has different needs. So if it's a big enough, like if you can justify it, if you can make it customizable, add different typefaces that people can choose from, or let people invert the colors or change the font size, and so that you can control what those settings do, but then give people options. Like if you're working on a platform or an app, that might make more sense. What I would love to avoid or see dropped is the whole, hey, we made this accessibility site and it's text only. That's a bummer. That's kind of a cop-out. Sure, yeah. So sites that I trust or recommend, as just a shining, glowing example of awesomeness, is the Simply Accessible website. They made a responsive, beautiful site that shows their company's capabilities, and they had illustrators work on it. Jerry Cody, I think, she was designer of the year for the Net Awards a couple years ago. She did all their illustration, and they just are leading by example. They have a great responsive site, and it has all these, I refer to that one all the time when I'm looking for a good example. For more resources, there's the Accessibility Project. They have a bunch of articles and UI patterns and things. I think it's a11yproject.com. WebAIM, which stands for Web Accessibility in Mind, they are a group that is doing a lot of the best work in accessibility, and they have articles about, what is cognitive accessibility, or how do you use tab index, and all of these conceptual things and technical things. So I would definitely say WebAIM. I refer to them all the time. Yeah. One in the back. I have definitely had project managers and people say accessibility is not part of the scope, or it's not our audience. I've gotten that one a lot. I tend to just go la 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 la, and I don't care. But you have to balance time and money, right? I mean, so I try to look at accessibility fixes in terms of how much time they will take and get some of the easy wins, like adding alt text or changing things to real buttons, or easy wins, and sort of using your estimation skills to say, all right, well, that's a bigger thing. Maybe we can do that bigger piece later, but I can get some of the easy wins in now. I'm the kind of person who would stay late to do that, and I know that not everyone would. So part of the idea is getting people bought into the process earlier. Unfortunately, sometimes that takes, the CEO's mom getting a degenerative vision condition. And that doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does, and then it becomes top-down. All I'm saying is that motivation sometimes needs to come from the top down to actually have it. You don't have to be the one barking up the tree going, hey, we need to care about this. So that's kind of a mixed answer, but I think if you can prioritize and look at things that you can get in easily, that's probably the best place to start. Yeah, so there are a couple of tools that you can run your site through just to check. And I could actually I'll put a list together and tweet about it, because there's some tools that, actually I already have an article I've written called How I Audit a Website for Accessibility. If you look for that, it already has all of these tools. But things like adding alt text to images, unless they're decorative and they're not really important, and then you can leave it blank. Using semantic HTML, like button elements. Let's see, what else? Adding the focus style back in, like if you have the focus ring turned off because you hate it, it's a real concern. But adding that back in, just testing it with a keyboard. Can you use a keyboard to do everything? That would get a lot of people. Yeah, just tabbing through the keyboard. Can you get to everything and operate everything? And if you skip past interface controls, you know that they're not accessible and that they should be. And just knowing what the problems are gives you a plan of attack. And you can say, all right, well, that's a pretty big piece, but at least you know the problem is there. And then you can work it into your plan to fix it in the long run. One in the back.
Can you give us an example of changing a life? What an example of how you would do changing a life? Like, you know what, I do this and this is what happens. Sarah, I do this. Just an example.
Yeah, I got to think about that. Put me on the spot. It's like the one I can't answer.
I started it wrong. Changing lives that made their experience better. And that made you feel great.
Yes. Just seeing things like, the site that I was kind of harping on was virginamerica.com. They are slowly changing it. It has been a year. And I think that highlighted that they were a big company, that an agency had done the work for them and then handed it off. And the agency was the group that I was like, no, don't do that. And they'd handed it off, and so it was, Virgin's concern after that point. And so it's taken them a little bit longer, now that I know that that's how the process works. They're slowly adding that back in. There's focus on there on parts. And just knowing that, there's people who would never go buy an airline ticket from Virgin because they can't get to the site or they can't operate it, knowing that that opens up their choices to actually be able to go and fly that airline. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't, because it's been a bad experience. But just knowing that you could actually make a website that people use more accessible, like that gives people more options. So it's sort of a high level. I wish I had a better example. If I think of one, I'll let you know. Sure. Sure, yeah. So ARIA is it's a technical term. It's an acronym for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And in HTML, I talked about semantic HTML. So there's special tags that have semantic meaning. ARIA is an API that you can use to add semantics to your HTML without necessarily using a specific tag. So you could say, this is a dialogue. I'm going to try and sidestep some of this technical stuff. But with ARIA, you can actually add semantics just by using attributes. And what that does is, in a screen reader, that actually exposes semantic information to assistive technology. So that's a pretty good tool to have if you're a front-end developer. I actually didn't even touch it for the first 3 years, I think. Like the whole time I worked at POP and I worked on accessibility, I did not use ARIA at all. Because what I found, and actually the feedback I got from Target, was that I was doing it wrong. This could have been a slide in here. That I did it wrong at first, and I got that feedback, and I found, okay, I don't fully understand this, so I'm just going to stop using it and do what I can just with semantic HTML and JavaScript to sort of pass focus around. And I could get pretty far without it. So I'd say if you're beginning with accessibility, I wouldn't even worry about ARIA right now. I think voice interfaces that's something I would really love to look into more. Things like Dragon, naturally speaking, are voice, just ways that you can interact with a web page. And there's some technical, interesting things there. I think they've made their own browser in that, and so sometimes the support for accessibility is a little lagging. But those are technologies that people are using. And so if enough people use a technology, that will really drive innovation and support for it. There's other assistive technologies like Zoom Text, which the group WebAIM, they have a screen reader survey that they do every couple of years. And they just came out with a new version last week. And out of nowhere, one of the assistive technologies that didn't have that many numbers before, all of a sudden is really popular. And Zoom Text is both a screen magnifier and a screen reader. And what it highlighted was that there's this huge segment of low vision people who are underrepresented. And so when that data point emerged in this screen reader survey, which you can find on the webaim.org site, once that became more obvious, all of a sudden we need to start testing with that. So by getting this feedback, because there's no actual analytics for accessibility, for privacy concerns. People don't want to be tracked because then you'll get shoved off onto the text-only website. So people self-report this data to WebAIM. And by learning that Zoom Text is an assistive technology that's rising in numbers, all of a sudden that sort of moves up in the priority list for what you need to test against. So there are some really cool technologies that people are using. The voice piece, I think, that's going to be really interesting. And I actually saw a demo recently that was a prototype that, when you're creating prototypes and you want to show multiple screens, how you flip between them when you're just prototyping, you're maybe not going to build out the entire navigation system. You might just go hack at the URL, which if you're demoing something for a meeting, you're going to do like the bare minimum you can to show the interface, whatever the prototype's purpose is. But if you could make that a smoother experience by navigating by voice, all of a sudden your prototype is more interesting. And that technology could be used for accessibility. So places that I'm really curious about are ways that prototypes or interfaces could be better that would actually benefit accessibility. Like that's a win for everybody. We have one in the way back. Sure, yeah. So the question was about motion design and some of the hurdles with accessibility, right? Yeah, so I think the biggest hurdle with stuff like that is for people with vestibular disorders. So motion can make people dizzy and sick. And this is top of mind because there was a really good article in A List Apart this last week by Val Head, and it was about designing, I forget the title, but it was something about designing responsibly with motion, and she's an animation expert. And so this could be applied to the web, it could be applied to motion graphics. Just knowing that sometimes interfaces make people sick, they get vertigo, or sometimes the effects can last after, like long after they've even looked at the site. And there's some challenges there. With interfaces, you could give somebody an option to turn motion off. And this actually came up on iOS. The animation on iOS was making people dizzy. And so even Apple got tripped up by that. They made, there's a reduce motion setting now in iOS so that you can handle that. Challenge with motion graphics and videos is that you don't have that option. You're not gonna, I mean, maybe if it's online, but if you're in a theater and the motion's going to make you sick, maybe give people a warning, say seizure warning, or at least let people, decide whether they want to look at it. If you know it's going to be like really flashing. So I'd say with motion, it's probably the biggest challenge is, well, the motion piece and then actually describing what's happening on screen to people who can't see it. So I think that's sort of the two pieces to that. So captions, captioning things. How much time do we have? Okay, another 5 minutes. And negative. So we're good. And everyone seems like they're ready to go. Thank you so much.